This is Embedded FM. I'm Alicia White here with Christopher White, and it will just be us this week. We have news and announcements and an actual technical discussion that I promise will end in flaming earths and flying poo. That wasn't overselling it, was it?
Or was it underselling it? Don't go away.
I guess the first announcement is that next week will be the week of April Fools. Last year, we did an April Fool's episode. If you are new to the show, you can go back and listen to it. It was us interviewing our cat about embedded systems, in which she says, "Mrap, mrap, mrap." And Christopher occasionally interjects really dryly hilarious statements in which it is apparent that he cannot believe he's taking part in this. Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. Many people did not. In any case, there will be no April Fool's episode because April Fool's does not show up on the day we release.
Yeah, that's the reason.
Well, that and the fact that I trained the cat to meow all the time. Boy, was that stupid. She never shuts up. Okay, so that was one announcement. Do you have any others?
Do I have any others? No.
Oh, okay. So this is all just me.
I never have anything to announce.
The Hackaday Prize is started, and It is different this year.
How is it different this year?
There are many different smaller contests at the beginning, ramping up to a larger contest at the end. So the idea is to get people involved right away. Between now and I think end of April, they are doing a design contest. And then it will be another design contest with a slightly different theme, and then another one and another one. Each one having a few more features that they want. But if you have a good idea that will help somebody, get started. And then at the end, they will choose 100 that they like the best, and those will go for further judging and end up with lots of money.
So wait, do you have to participate in the early design contests to proceed throughout the entire thing?
No, you don't. You can just enter the later ones, or the early ones are to get more money, more goodies involved as you're building it.
Okay.
And their goals are really around build something that matters, build something that will change the world, build something good.
What was it last time?
It was similar, except that was sort of the overall theme, and this time they have sub-themes. Things like citizen scientist, where they want you to make it so we can monitor things, lots of things, maybe temperature across the ocean sorts of things. And then they have one that's assistive technologies that is for maybe people who can't see very well. What technology would you build for them? And automation. And they have little themelets. And those will feed into the final contest, but not really super specific. And they do have one that's general. It's independent thinking, anything goes. And so there's a theme on that one too. You don't have to fall in their categories this year.
But there's no theme for the final contest. It's the same kind of overall theme for the big prize as last year, or is there a more specific thing this year?
If you fall into one of the categories, I think it will go better for you. But
right.
I was a little unclear on that.
Okay.
I'll ask. I'm not a judge this year. They gave us 2-year tenures and told us to go off and play. And so I was thinking about what I would enter when one of the organizers came back and said, well, could you actually advise us on the whole judging process? We've got lots of new judges and maybe we can work out something. So I'm not participating.
They just wanted to disqualify you.
I guess so. I hope so. It's kind of flattering. But one of the things I was thinking about, and this is imprudent to say at this point, because I have book, blog, actual work, class, surf lessons. So adding anything right now seems imprudent, but still. They told me advisor judge, and I started thinking, what would an advisor judge do? And I was thinking I would advise people, like, if you have a project and you're going to be serious about it, and you're going to enter it in October when it's finished, because I don't really know that much about the intermediate things, but if you're really, really serious about this, maybe I could do an open judging thing where I would score you based on the same score I gave in the last 2 years. And you could see the averages from the last 2 years to see where you rank in those. And I could give 4 or 6 lines of things that would be easy to fix. Because one year someone would have done better if only he had one source file, but because reproducibility and open and documentation are all separate categories, missing one source file gets dinged in a bunch of spots. So I could say that before you entered. If you're interested, if you're going to participate, if you're pretty sure you're going to participate, let me know. I'm still sort of hashing it out both in my own mind, and Christopher's shaking his head like,
this will never air.
This will never air? You're not going to... No, I don't need any things to do?
No.
Well, it's not for months, and, if I could... last year I judged 30, the year before it was 50. If I end up judging 30 this year, that would be okay with me. I get to see lots of new technologies when I judge. So open judging.
And they're okay with this?
They think that I'll be inundated and that I shouldn't do it. But then they were also sort of excited. So we'll see.
All right.
They didn't say no.
That's very nice of you.
It's selfish in some respect. I do learn a lot.
Yeah, that's a pretty small definition of selfish.
All right. Speaking of learning a lot. Let's see. Dennis.
Oh yeah, feedback from previous shows. A friend of mine and the show, Dennis, notes that Cygwin ships with strace. We talked about strace with Julia a couple shows back. And on Windows, it actually seems to work. So if you would like to play around with strace and you're a Windows person, you get Cygwin and you run it from the command line, and that does seem to actually give you some data. So interesting. I don't know what it would show on Windows, but apparently it shows something.
Apparently. And we did get some feedback that Dan Liu spoke a little quickly. Yes, we did notice that, actually. Thank you. Apologies to those of you for whom he spoke too quickly. One time I went to conference sessions based on who spoke the most quickly, and it worked out really well. I got a lot of information that day, but I can see how it can be hard, especially if you're not a native English speaker.
I don't know what's next. What's next? Robo-drooling.
And podcast wars.
Okay. There's not enough data on that for me to expound.
We are the sworn enemy of the AMP hour. Yes, we did hear that.
Oh. The enemy podcast?
The enemy podcast,
Not quite sure how that works.
I'm not sure either. It sounded like Chris Gamble was ramping up to say nice things about the podcast. And there's this little click, like maybe there was a clip. And then suddenly we're the enemy podcast. And Chris still enjoyed the bunny episode, but we have a new title.
See, I don't think that's a good idea to be picking fights with the software people. I mean, I know how servers work.
Yeah.
I know how denial of service works.
Well, I don't think we need to be... We can be their enemy, but they don't have to be ours. It's all one big...
I mean, they can't do anything to my hardware from remotely.
Really? I don't think it's a good idea to pick fights.
It's not like he can get on KiCad and make my computer stop working.
There's a KiCad joke buried in there. I could go straight for that.
All right.
Anyway, yes. We are friends with the AMP Hour, and there are no hard feelings. There is no actual podcast war except in someone's mind.
So you have robo-drooling on here, which I thought probably referred to the episode with Sarah Petkus. But you actually got a question on Twitter last week from somebody who was looking for robot kits for their kid.
Yes, it was great.
And you did some drooling over some kits.
Yes, I did. He sent a picture that had been drawn, definitely preteen, probably older than 4. You know, I don't have kids. It's hard for me to tell between those two. And it was a bipedal robot that looked very robot-y.
Classical 1950s.
Yeah. And then there was another picture of what seemed to be a motor relay board that was not bad, perhaps not up to professional standards, but not bad.
It was actually connected? I thought it was just some parts.
It looked like the motors could plug into those parts. I think we just didn't have a complete picture. And he asked what kits might be suitable to build the bipedal robot. I went straight to SparkFun and looked around and just ended up with the Redbot Inventor's Kit because it had all the parts, although that's not really bipedal. Yeah.
What else did you find? You found a couple other things, right?
Oh, I found the robot. There was a website. I'll have to look it up. And they had all kinds of bipedal kits, but it was unclear that you were building the robot. It was more software.
Oh, okay. So kind of like Lego Mindstorms, which you didn't suggest.
I didn't suggest Lego Mindstorms. I guess I sort of thought it would be obvious. But yeah, Lego Mindstorms would be reasonable as well.
Okay.
So those bipedal robots were at a place called robotshop.com in their biped development platforms. There were lots of cute things. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Lego's Mindstorms would be the way to go.
It seems the easiest way to go for somebody who doesn't want to mess with electronics. But if you want to learn electronics, it's definitely not the right way to go.
Yeah, that would be where SparkFun would come in more, or Adafruit.
Speaking of robots, Google is selling Boston Dynamics.
Yeah, do you want to buy them? What would you do with scary, scary, scary robots that have been hit with sticks all their lives?
I don't know, put them in a sanctuary and let them live in the pasture. I don't know what Google was doing with it to start with. So I guess they had their own robotics division for a while, and then maybe they've decided not to do that, or they decided that Boston Dynamics didn't fit. It was weird. It wasn't really clear. And of course, they're Google, so they're not going to tell you what they were doing.
They're Alphabet.
But I'm not sure. So Boston Dynamics, I think their intended market was military, right?
Yeah, that was why they didn't work with Google. It didn't make any sense for Google to have them.
Well, maybe.
I mean, as far as we know.
I suspect both Google and Apple are prowling around the Department of Defense these days looking for contracts or ideas for contracts. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if anybody picks them up. And I don't know who would pick them up.
I don't know if they'll spin them out if they don't get picked up.
Well, probably.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say on that.
Okay. I think a robot sanctuary. Sarah would let Noodle come to visit.
Right. She should buy them.
Yes. One of our listeners, Justin, ran across some microcontrollers at a sale, and he bought them. And there are 8 reels of 800, and these are Atmel AT32 UC3A32565. Anyway, they are 32-bit processors that are not Cortex-based. And they're not bad processors. They're not the latest.
They're AVRs?
Yeah, they're AVR-based.
32-bit AVRs, all right.
And so Justin bought them thinking that they would be super cool and fun to play with, but they do need some bootloading, and so they haven't worked out for him. If you are interested, let me know and I can connect you to him, whether you want them for yourself or if you want them for a good cause. I hear there's going to be a big discount for a good home. Yeah. So let me know. Just email the show at Embedded, or hit the contact link on embedded.fm. Say you're interested in Justin's microcontrollers, and I'll have a link for the exact ones on the show notes.
Anyone who needs 6,000 microcontrollers.
I'm sure we can build lots of robots with that. Okay, now the blog. We've been doing the blog for a month. We had Andre and Chris on the show, and at the time we were just barely starting. And now we've had 4 weeks, 5 weeks now of almost every day we put something up, and most of us go once a week. We've had things that went from I'm still working through toys and what I would write for a book on taking apart toys and what you can learn from looking inside.
Well, it's your actual book.
Oh, yeah. No, it's my actual book, although it's sort of draft. I think the publisher will clean a few things up. Although I think the pictures may be better on the blog. I don't know what the publisher's going to do with the pictures.
Right. They could be black and white in the book.
But Andre has been doing his Embedded Wednesdays, talking about how numbers are formatted and how two's complement works and really detailed stuff like that. Svek,
The last one was about formatting data from ADCs.
Well, from an accelerometer, yeah, because he actually had that as one post where he talked about how to do two's complements, and then he talked about how to do the ADC from the accelerometer. And he broke it up because they do get a little long if we just get to talk about everything we want to talk about in a week. Svek has taken a totally different approach. It's hilarious to watch them because they're so different. They want to cover some of the same material, but in totally different ways. Svek is coming at it from a very microcontroller point of view, and he's going through add and sub and jump as instructions and how that works. And it's not that assembly is necessary to know, but it's necessary to know how a microprocessor works to be able to use it at the high level. And there are rumors that there will be giveaways of dev kits to go along with his sessions. But that will all be in the blog, so you have to follow that to check it out. And to follow it, you can sign up for the newsletter, which was an adventure. If you are thinking about putting together a newsletter, I had no idea what a pain in the neck it was. You have to have a real address that you put at the bottom of the newsletter in order to meet the CAN spam legal requirements. And so we went and got a post office box. It was very exciting. But yeah, so newsletter, sign up for it.
It almost works.
It sort of worked today. I mean, sure, the recent posts were like from 2 weeks ago, but the detailed information was current. Software and I don't always get along. It's very strange that I've chosen to do this because if it can break, it will break for me.
Well, it's hardware that breaks.
That too, but
everything breaks.
Everything breaks. And I should stop pushing buttons. And that brings into my next thing, which was checklists that our posts are getting complicated, and it keeps making me wish for some form of checklist software.
I'm sure nothing like that exists anywhere.
I haven't found anything that works for me. Okay, so when we do a post, it is in Google Drive and then somebody else reviews it. And then it gets moved to Squarespace, where, man, do not get me started on Squarespace.
For some reason, we're the only people who are incapable of using the Squarespace editor without having it have all kinds of problems.
Okay, so once it's in Squarespace, it gets moved to Needs Review. It also gets social media URLs and an excerpt and a picture. And then someone else comes and schedules it for publishing and verifies everything else that should have happened. Yeah, can you imagine how many times we don't manage to tweet these things or whatever because we didn't add all of the little check boxes? What's even more hilarious is it's the same site and Squarespace system that we use for the podcast. And the comments are on for the blog, but not for the podcast. And so now I have another checklist for the podcast that I have to do all of these things with social media and excerpts and making sure the links are good. And I have to remember to turn off the comments. And if I don't turn off the comments, then they get stuck on and Squarespace can't seem to turn them off because Squarespace. This is so not an ad for Squarespace. I know every other blog or every other podcast is like, you should use Squarespace. No. Oh my God, no.
Yeah. Well, the alternatives all are worse.
I recognize.
There is no good option unless you're a professional web developer, which, given how much time it takes when we're using the things that are prepackaged, I don't really want to be a professional web developer.
No, me neither. But yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about checklists, and I have a work project that involves power monitoring that is, this jumper, then program, then don't forget to take off the programmer, don't forget to take off the debug, and then you add power here, and you put a resistor there, and blah, 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 blah. And then
it's not just checklists. I mean, that's the whole idea behind test-driven development, and the whole idea behind unit testing is you're verifying that things work at each stage of development, or each stage of a project, or each stage of coming into operating something for the first time. You run through some a checklist is a series of tests. I mean, they're simple tests. They might be visual inspection. They might be, this happened.
Well,
but
these are a lot of things I need to do, and they're tweaky little things that I forget often.
Sure. But yeah, checking that you have done something is a test.
Oh, absolutely.
And people don't like doing things like that because it gets in the way of doing the things you think you're supposed to be doing.
It does. It feels rote.
That's why I crashed my airplane.
Oh, yeah.
A few weeks back, because I got so frustrated that I just took off and I hadn't bothered to actually run through the flight checklist. And this is a radio-controlled airplane, not a real one. I did not crash in an airplane. But in that case, servos were reversed on a couple of the control surfaces. And had I had a checklist and said, okay, when I move the stick this way, this flap comes up this way, that wouldn't have happened.
That, by the way, ended up being a blog post, the video of the very short video of the airplane.
Which has subsequently flown much better. But it's the simple things like that where you get frustrated. And so you skip the checklist and you get frustrated with, Squarespace is frustrating. So you get frustrated with it and you just push go and get through it and done with it because those aren't the things that you're doing, right? You want to be flying the plane, or you want to be writing software, or you want to be writing.
Or I want to be writing a blog post.
A blog post. You don't want to be managing all the infrastructure that surrounds all of that. And so that's why people skip things, is because they get frustrated with doing things that they think aren't really related to the fun part or the important part.
It isn't the frustration to me. It's just, I get focused on something else and I just forget. It's just pure, I didn't remember.
Well, that's the place where a checklist would help, because you probably would be motivated in that case to follow it.
But I have Post-it note checklists, and they last for about 3 go rounds, and then they get trashed, and I forget to make a new one. And I tried doing it on my iPhone, and that didn't quite work out.
It's not in front of your face. You have to know to go look for the checklist.
Yeah, and I think Chris Vex suggested we put it at the top of each blog post, but then I'm sure I would just leave the checklist in the blog post. So I don't know. I don't have a good method for this, and I'm sad about it. So
it seems like the chief problem is that you don't have something that's just there that you see, and so you forget that if you had it in a text file, you'd have to remember to open the text file before you did the thing, right?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
And you mentioned the Post-it notes. That's something that it's there for a while and then it gets torn up and then you don't recreate it.
Yeah, and I want it to be like part of, I don't know, Chrome or Safari or Firefox, and have it say, oh, you're about to push go on one of your blog posts. Have you done all of these things? I guess I want to live in the future.
Well, yeah, all right. That's difficult.
I brought it up in case somebody out there had a good, easy solution that was...
I don't think anybody's going to have anything that knows that you're writing a blog post. You're asking for Clippy.
I am. Oh, that's so awful. I'm asking for Clippy. Oh, Clippy. You and I could be such good friends.
Looks like you're posting on Squarespace. Did you remember to save 3 times?
Yeah. When I do save on Squarespace, sometimes it deletes something. Like, I know you should save more often, but I'm a little afraid of saving. That's what Squarespace has brought to me.
Like I said to all of you, nobody else is complaining about these things in their support forums. I think it's... I don't know.
I don't even think we're complaining.
If anybody would like to write a CMS for us that works all the time and is very simple to use and is comfortable to edit in, we will pay you nothing, but use it, and we'll mention it on the show.
Well, and it should be able to withstand my incredible abilities to make everything break.
And it should import natively from Google Docs, so you can just write in Google Docs, and then it goes straight to the blog.
You know, we do write in Google Docs because the collaborative editing is just amazing sometimes. I have been impressed by that. So yes, it should import from Google Docs.
All right, enough baseball.
Yeah, well, so your posts recently, there was the plane crashing, which was hilarious. But there was also one where you talked about what you were using to learn the ham material for amateur radio license.
Yeah, I asked on Twitter, and a whole bunch of people responded with actually a wide variety of. I haven't already talked about this.
No.
A wide variety of resources. So I was studying. I already took the exam. I was studying to get a technician license because for RC planes, if you want to do first-person camera transmitting back from the plane, there's virtually nothing that's legal that you can buy. There's a couple of transmitters that are very low power and on one channel, but everything else you buy is in the amateur frequency bands. So you have to have a license to be transmitting from your plane back to your...
Supposed to.
Legally. And most people don't, but it's not that big a deal, and it's kind of fun. And I had a ham license years ago, but I let it lapse in 2007 or 9 or something like that.
7.
So I thought, well, maybe I'll go retake the test and get my license back up, and then I'll be free and clear to play around with the planes. So I asked on Twitter what people had been studying with, because years ago there weren't iPhones and apps and things like that.
Well, you brought home a book to study for the test, and then you left it on the coffee table, and we both went and took the test because me faced with the book, I couldn't.
In 1997.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now it's great. There's tons of websites. There's a bunch of apps, and there's a bunch of great books and ebooks out there. Most of this is free. And so I used a couple of the suggestions and studied for 2 weeks, and this weekend went and took the...
Well, and you studied like as though it were a new video game you had.
Well, I had the
serious study.
The practice app, which gives you practice exams, and you just can take them over and over and over again while you're waiting in line or sitting in your car at waiting for somebody at a store or something. So yeah, it takes about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, maybe maximum to take an exam. So I probably went through 50 or 60 and it kept track of the things you missed and said, okay, these areas are the areas that you're doing poorly on each time you took the test. And then it would give you a history of all your exams, and you could see if you were doing better. And once I was passing regularly, I said, okay, well, I'll go next weekend and take the exam. So yeah, and I passed the technician, and the people administering the exam suggested I take the next level because it was free. And I didn't think I would pass that because I hadn't studied for it. And I did pass that. So now I am General White.
But you don't know your call sign yet?
They have not done it. Yeah. Has not been issued as of today, Tuesday.
Yeah. Should be soon though. So
yeah.
Yes.
So
from now on,
it's very
General
cool.
White.
And the funny thing is, I was only intending to kind of use it to be in the clear with the airplane stuff, and maybe for using long range airplane control over UHF, although that's less important now that the FAA has banned out of line of sight flight. But now that I passed the general, I'm starting and looking at all kinds of other fun stuff you could do with it. I'm playing around with a Morse code education app and stuff like that. So maybe I'll actually get into ham radio because I have so much time.
Speaking of having far too much time, let us get into the Flaming Earth section of this show.
Really?
Too soon?
No, it's fine.
Is that what you call it, Flaming Earth?
No.
What do you call it?
I didn't call it anything yet.
So what we're sort of talking around is our Unity class, which we've mentioned on the show before.
So what's Unity?
Unity is a game engine. It is known for being a 3D game engine, but it also has 2D. And it works very well with lots of different interfaces. Sophie Kravitz was on the show and talked about integrating Wiggle Ball into Unity as a game playing metric, and you can use like your accelerometer from your phone or other device, and it compiles native for a bunch of language or for a bunch of platforms, Mac, PC, Windows. It's
Android and iOS.
It also does mobiles and it does web, although for some reason Chrome does not work. But for the most part, you can play in a web browser. And that we decided to take a class in large part to score ourselves some VR glasses that we might or might not be able to get. But so we started taking this Unity class, and we talked a little bit about the blood splatter a few episodes ago. But yeah, I wanted to talk about our games right now because they're both pretty amusing, but also about how doing this development is so much different than doing embedded systems development.
Okay.
Okay, go.
Okay, go. Which part?
Whichever.
So, gosh, I don't know. I mean, the part of the class is to go through various types of games and use that as a hook to learn different parts of the engine and the development environment. And we've gone through three, I think. 3 small games. And the latest one is the longest one so far. It's sort of a Galaxian clone, and you're supposed to put your own stamp on it. So I didn't. I've been copying an old game from the Apple II called Alien Rain.
Well, I mean, it was different than the material they gave you for the...
Oh, yeah. They give you all
class.
the assets, and you can just use their assets, or you can go wild and do your own stuff. But the mechanics of the game are basically the same, although you can tweak stuff to your own liking. So yeah, I'm just making basically a clone of a clone of a clone of Galaxian from 1982.
But then you added... adding animations is really weirdly easy, and you added the Earth spinning, and then if you're losing, it starts to get explosions, and then when you finally lose, the Earth is a fiery ball.
Yes, and then you did your game, which is just very standard. You didn't really do anything different with yours, right?
Well, yeah, I actually did. So imagine that, how do you describe it? My game has poopy sounds. My game has a cat. My game has poopy sounds and a cat. Yeah, that really is about, those are the highlights, man. I'll put mine on Game Bucket, which will last for 30 days, and you can try it out. It is similar to Galaxia in that there are things on the top that fire down on things on the bottom, and you control the thing on the bottom, which is a cat. You can throw yarn at the mice, and if the mice are trying to kill you with their poos, and if you hit the poo with a yarn, then it can go back up to the mouse and kill it immediately, or you can hit the mice with 3 yarns and that will kill them. And yeah, it is just as bad as it sounds. I really enjoyed speaking with Simone about her robots, about her you could just go ahead and bleep me here, her shitty robots. And I guess I may have channeled what I learned from Simone into this game.
I think you learned the wrong lesson.
It is a terrible game. And having played it for quite a while, doing different testing things and trying to make it so you can lose, which now you can lose. For a long time you couldn't. And you should lose because the whole violence at the end is hilarious.
You're just spoiling the whole thing.
Anyway, yeah, it is. I learned that sometimes you can make something really, really terribly awful, and that makes it even more hilarious, and it makes me laugh each and every time. So yeah, I put that out there as an example of maybe what not to do. Yeah, but I've learned a lot, and so I did enjoy the game, and I enjoyed developing it. But I've also really started to look at my compilers and that I use in my day-to-day job. And I look at them and I think, well, you're crappy. And I think this whole how we do this processor and data sheet stuff, learning Unity, there's so much to learn. I've only learned this tiny, tiny corner, and I know there's this huge amount more that I can do. I mean, we started animations, and I'm like, oh, this isn't very hard. And then it kept getting more and more complicated. Like the cat's eyes blink, which was not part of the class. And I was so amused to make that happen. So it's not that Unity is smaller than developing an embedded system. You can't convince me that. So why is it so much easier to get started in?
Well, for one thing, Unity is directed towards non-programmers, I think. I think it's designed, it's oriented towards people who want to develop games who aren't necessarily software developers. There's a lot of it that could be done by artists with a limited amount of technical background, I think.
Well, and they encourage that because they want you to write scripts, but then have generic names so that someone else could do the asset.
So what I'm not sure about is whether any of the kind of paradigms of development that come out of a game engine are applicable to devices.
I don't know if directly applicable.
Because I just can't see myself in my day-to-day work. All the hardware, this is the problem. The target with Unity is always a similar microprocessor with a similar graphics chip and similar resources. Similar being an order of magnitude.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at, and I'm not quite agreeing because I've had some people who couldn't run my game well in Safari or
that's
tweaky little things like that. But you're right. No,
that's not what I mean.
The difference between that and my iPhone, my computer, and my iPhone is a lot smaller than the difference between my computer and my Cortex M0
and a Cortex M4 with the auxiliary graphics chip or something. There's too many combinations and options. But then again, I don't know, because things like Mbed are out there and things like Arduino are out there, which make it a little easier, but they're not. The thing about Unity is so much of it is visual, right? It's not, most of what you seem to do so far is import objects. It's very object-oriented, but you see all the objects. You see their interrelationships. You plot out their movements visually. And most of the code that's involved is little glue scripts that do a little bit of logic, because there's no logic in the visual part, for the most part, which is a completely different thing than embedded systems programming, which is inherently non-visual. You may not even have a display or anything. So it's all logic from that standpoint. That's a separate thing from the tools are terrible versus the tools in Unity seem well developed.
Well, the documentation of Unity is well developed. The documentation for a processor I'm using right now, which is pretty new, but still the documentation is really bad. And I feel every time I go and have to look up how to run the damn ADC again, I'm just infuriated. Because why does it have 45 different options? And it just doesn't, the way they laid them out makes zero sense. And I think I'm messing stuff up. It's like Unity is designed to work when you put buggy inputs in, and embedded systems tend to be not resilient to buggy things.
I don't understand that.
Like when my animations don't work, they either yell at me because they don't work or they don't do anything at all. But if my microprocessor's ADC was set up inappropriately, it either doesn't, it does the worst possible thing. I don't know why my ground is reading high, but or it actually has a hard fault in spots. It's not the worst thing that could happen, but it's just the documentation is...
Again, that's the difference between application programming and bare metal. I mean, if something goes wrong bare metal, there's nowhere to go. If an application fails, well, the process has an error and your computer stays running.
But the tools help me through that. I mean, in Unity, we have this idea of build and run, and it's build and deploy and run. And just like in embedded systems, we have build and load and run. There's that extra step that is cross-compiling to some effect, to some
Oh, yeah. Not even to some extent. It is cross-compiling.
And so usually when I say there's a cross compiler, that's what makes everything hard. And Unity is showing me that it isn't that step that makes everything hard.
No.
It is some other step. And you're right, it has to do with bare metal, and it has to do with not being as well adopted, because Unity has a lot more programmers than IAR, Quile, or even the GCC ones.
Well, I think if you added up all of the embedded programmers in the world who are doing it professionally or semi-professionally, and put that on a scale with all the game developers using Unity, you wouldn't even see. It would be obvious. And they're making a tool. They're making a tool specifically for this market, whereas IAR is making a tool for many, many markets.
And that is a big point, yes, because IAR and the other compilers, not just to pick on IAR, they're being used for toys, they're being used for medical devices, they're being used for all kinds of different things. And some people want Misra, and some people want it to be super fast, and some people don't care about that. They just want their compiler to be cheaper. And so the ways that they're being pulled is many more than Unity, which has a more focused direction. Sure, it's got 2D and 3D, and it's still got, but in general.
I really do think the quality of our tools comes down to the size of the market. And there's just, these are small companies making these tools. I don't think IAR is huge. I don't think Quile is huge. And, I feel like I'm being an apologist a little bit, but I feel like if the market were bigger, then the tools would appear.
I think so. I agree with that, but I'm just still surprised at the difference, and I hope that some of the niceties trickle down.
I don't think they will. I think they're totally separate worlds.
If you look at compiling in embedded systems 10 or 20 years ago, it was a lot different than then.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It seems exactly the same.
This is better.
It seems exactly the same to me.
It's exactly the same as now as software development was then.
What?
Embedded development has about the same level of tool goodness as software development had many years ago.
Well, if you're using 10 for many, I disagree.
It seems
10 was 2006. I was using Greenhill's toolchain targeting x86, and it looked exactly the same as IAR does today to me. Same stupid windows, same not very anti-aliased fonts.
Same stupid new line. No new line in the file bug.
I would say there has been zero advancement in the front-end tool that you interface with in the last decade in the embedded world.
I wonder if that's
except for
people
perhaps
are using
stuff
Eclipse.
Like, some of the static analyzers and the trace support stuff. That's probably advanced because the hardware support is advanced, so it had to. But
well, the Misra stuff has advanced. I didn't used to have that.
But I know we harp on IAR constantly, but it's what I spend my day in. The layout, the user interface, it's god-awful. It's late 90s god-awful.
But it's inconsistent.
It's inconsistent. It doesn't stay the same. The windows change place. The little sub-windows change place all the time, depending on if you're debug or editing. Things disappear off the window.
That's annoying.
It's not useful. I don't need a giant 100-line debug log window to come up every time I start debugging. I don't ever want to see that.
You can save your workspace, right?
Yeah, I know. It still changes it. It doesn't matter.
I'll look at Christopher's setup.
And I have multi-monitors. If it's on one monitor, it decides to lose half the stuff when you come back to the other thing. And you can't even find the pane to close to make it reorganize itself. It's just not good. And nobody spends any time on that.
Yeah.
So that's the area that I would love to see improve, is just take the friction out of the standard interface that we are all familiar with. And I know everybody uses Eclipse and loves it. I don't understand.
There are some nice things about Eclipse. The autocomplete, I don't understand why IAR doesn't have good autocomplete now. Come on, that's a feature from 2002. It's time. And, well, yeah, there are a lot of features I want. But mostly, I also would like the error messages to be like the actual error messages.
No new line and end of file I got that one. All week I've had that one.
I know, and I'm surprised because I had it last week and I mentioned it.
Now it's the Bader-Meinhof syntax error.
Yeah. If you haven't gotten it, if you have gotten it and you don't know what it means, email us, we'll explain. It has nothing to do with there being a new line at the end of the file. Although, why you need a new line at the end of the file, I don't know. Isn't a curly brace enough? Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Unity games are fun. Unity class is interesting. My game is awful, terrible, really, really.
Yeah, I'm really worried about what you're going to make for the
13-year-olds.
For the next
Gonna cringe.
The next game, which is 3D.
You had another thing, Atomic Game Engine. What's that?
Yes, a colleague. When I mentioned we were playing around with Unity, a colleague mentioned that another game engine had gone completely open source and free, and that's the Atomic Game Engine, which seems similar. I mean, just looking at their webpage, I'm sure it's not quite as advanced as Unity is, just for probably because not as many people use it, but it looks nice. It's a cross-platform editor, deploys to all the usual targets. You can use your preferred scripting languages, just like Unity. So JavaScript, TypeScript, C++, C#, fully open source under MIT license. So
that's a pretty liberal one.
Yeah, extremely permissive. So yeah, there's a lot of options out there. And, I had always wanted to play around with writing games, but I didn't. I think I'd really wanted to write games back before there were a lot of engines like this. And I think the earlier engines were not as friendly. I think it was much more like embedded development. It gave you a hand here and there, but it was still a lot of code. But I've just been shocked at what this is like.
But it sounded like you thought I was focused on the wrong things.
With what?
With my things are...
No, I'm trying to understand it because I don't fully understand how it could apply necessarily. I don't think you're focused on the wrong things. I'm trying to work my way through it because it is such a different environment. It's hard for me to say, okay, what could I take from this? I mean, pick an example. What could we take and apply?
Fast compiling and emulation. I mean, when I want to play my game, I just play it. And if I wanted to be in this mode or that mode, I just switch scenes. And, if I want...
but that's easy for them.
Because they can emulate everything. It's
not
just
emulating
code.
anything.
Yeah.
It's running the engine.
But you don't... That lack of waiting 30 seconds to get it down and then set it up in the right mode and then do the whole voodoo to make it work, that's...
The iteration time on embedded systems
it's not getting faster either.
It's one of the things that is the biggest hurdle to productivity because I'm working on graphic stuff on an embedded system. And a lot of the stuff requires just tweaky little, okay, this one pixel's not right for some reason. And there might be 8 places that some flag is set wrong. And it's really hard. It's kind of hard to sit down and work it out on paper what the right thing might be, but it would be really easy to just say, okay, let's just go through all permutations of these flags until we find the right thing.
Well, in Unity, you could do that while it was running.
Right. On this, it's like, well, okay, it's a 1.5 minute turnaround every time I do that. So in order to set a flag right through trial and error, which I admit is not the greatest way to do things, but if trial and error takes 20 seconds versus working on a paper takes 20 minutes, sometimes I'll do the trial and error. But with an embedded system, it's like, okay, the turnaround time to see visual changes is 1.5 minutes. And there are ways around that, but not when you're developing low-level support code that does this on the chip. So, yeah, I don't know how to get that better.
No, I don't either.
USB 3 download to some flash chip that has a max speed of 10 megabits per second.
Yeah, that doesn't seem viable. All right, new subject. Chris Feck introduced me to the Emberly book, which is a little drawing book, probably for preschoolers. And it made me wonder about gaps in education. I didn't know, I didn't know until I was 8 that pancakes had no I in them. I thought they were, I would miss it on spelling tests. It was pancakes. I didn't realize there was no I in pancakes.
Wait, what? Why?
It was just
why would they be
something-
panic? Do they
Probably
make people
because
panic?
my mom thought it was cute that I said it that way, and I didn't ever know that that I was wrong.
I'm just trying to figure out the etymology of pancake.
I don't know. Patty cake, pancake, I don't know. I didn't know that responsibility had no D until high school.
Oh, I didn't know that chimney had a B.
Jimmy just... Oh, it does.
It's invisible.
It's invisible as well as being... Okay, but words aside, this Emberly book has little ways to draw things. You know, it's how to draw people running, how to draw a building, how to draw a lion. And it's not like it's great art, but it's icons. And if you look at the book, you probably will say, oh yeah, of course, because it is icons that are built into our society now. I mean, those are accepted visual cues for this thing, even though it doesn't really look like that. And I've done, I actually minored in art in college, or concentrated, or whatever the word you want to use is. And so I've done a fair amount of drawing, and I like the Draw 50 books, but if you use the Draw 50 books, at the end, you draw whatever was in there, and it's very hard to customize. The Emberly ones, they're really easy to customize, and I like that. And so my whole point here is, what other things did I just miss? What gaps did I not even know I had? That I'm now over 40 and discovering how to draw like a toddler and really liking it. Now is your turn to either say, well, that was the last gap, or my gaps are, or I don't know, maybe you've always drawn like a toddler. What was it? That was a conversational handout. Do we need an actual baton? We can have an actual baton if that's what you want.
I'm just not sure where to go with this. Yes, people have gaps in their education. I had gaps in my education, some of which became greatly apparent in college as I started to fail things after being a straight A student in high school. And the worst part about gaps in education is when it is assumed that you don't have that gap. So you can be really well educated and be good at stuff, and then come into a situation where a new class or a new job, and suddenly everybody knows something and you don't understand it at all. Or maybe there's a technique or a tool that they all have in their belts and you're not familiar with it. That's the experience I have, where landing in a college class that on paper I was perfectly prepared for, and it's like, well, wait a minute, how are they solving these problems? They're all using this particular math engine or technique that I've never seen before and don't understand, or don't know how to apply, or why I would apply it. That's where I got in trouble. And same thing happens in jobs. You end up, especially when you change jobs and you end up at a new place where people have been for a while, then they all have their own ways of doing things. You either end up the person saying, well, that's stupid, you should do it my way, which I have biases toward, or you end up kind of running around scared and not afraid to ask, well, what is this thing you all are doing? I've never seen that code pattern before, or algorithm. So I think we all experience this, not necessarily with drawing.
Well, it was just a good excuse to talk about it, that I am still surprised by these things that seem basic.
Well, I still have huge gaps in my kind of embedded education. There's a lot of stuff and other people know who I talk to or work with, and they're super comfortable with, low-level compiler knowledge or low-level processor, facts or understanding of how they operate in ways that are useful when you're writing code, that for me is like, well, I don't know, it's a microprocessor. So it makes me feel bad.
It wasn't...
Not bad enough to go learn it.
Well, yeah, there's that.
I mean, I'll learn it if I have to, if there's a bug or something, or if there's a new piece of work that requires me to learn it. But Yeah.
It was the shockingly easy things
Yeah, sure.
that kind of caught my attention. The things that I had sort of taught myself how to do, but taught myself how to do it the hard way and didn't even know there was an easy way to go. And I wonder how many other easy ways there are.
Well, it's apparently what's happening with math now. Kids come home with homework that adults with degrees in mathematics can't do because all the arithmetic has changed. And apparently they're teaching it in ways that make certain things very easy, like estimation and stuff like that, which are really useful tools to have, but not obvious that you should be good at estimation. So I think kids are going to come out with different holes in their education than we did, or maybe fewer. I don't know.
I'd say different. Having looked at some of the new math stuff, the estimation and the pathway to statistics is just so much better now. But the getting from here to there without a calculator is not the best, no.
Without a calculator?
Well, if you want a precise answer, it becomes harder.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't looked at it enough.
Oh, well. Yeah, let's see. That's actually all I had. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? I know we're a little short, but that's okay. We can go to the beach. Ha 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 ha.
You say that every time. Everybody's going to hate you.
I know. And you know what? I didn't bring down the book to do a final thought, so I'm just going to have to come up with one.
I don't think I had anything much else. I mean, I did at some point want to discuss RC planes and how cheap embedded processors has made that really interesting. But that's
okay, go.
Not
No, I mean,
Well, it's another one of these things that I've come back to after years and of being away from it and finding everything's different. And with the planes now, all of the radio stuff is digital and they all have telemetry channels. And since microcontrollers are cheap and sensors are cheap, you can just plug these modules together and get all this data back from your plane. You could get back altitude and GPS position and speed and temperature and whatever you want. And it's just another one of these areas where this kind of weird microcontroller revolution has made things really cool and really easy without knowing a lot of electronics, which is a little bit sad.
well, and you're looking at putting two different GPSs.
Only because I have to, because it's this modular system. And so one modular system is doing one thing and the other modular system is doing something else that don't talk to each other.
In my day,
Yeah.
GPSs cost over $100 and required their own separate power supply, bigger than the one you use for your whole dang plane.
Yeah.
Get off my lawn, kid.
Now I have a box full of them. But yeah, no, it's interesting. And I encourage people to look at hobbies they might have let go by the wayside and come back to them with electronics, because a lot of things have changed everywhere. And ham's the same way. I was looking at, after the exams, like, okay, what can I do with this? And everything's different. There's all this digital stuff. There's this weird
You said you wanted to find your old radio, and I'm like, I know where that is. And I'm like, you don't really want it.
No, it's that radio is perfectly fine for some stuff. You can still use
But
it.
not compared to all of the really amazing stuff that's happening.
There's all this low data rate digital stuff for really long distance communication with low power. It's really interesting how the world's mixed, because you think of ham radio as this static old white guy kind of thing. And there's a lot of new stuff happening even there that's pretty interesting, and experimentation. So I'm enjoying the experimentation part without necessarily having an end goal in mind.
I can see that. Yeah. All right, then. Well, I guess we will wrap it up. Oh, there was one more thing. Yes, we know that NPR launched a podcast called Embedded. I do not fear that you will get confused, dear listeners. But yes, we are aware of that, and we'll be talking a bit about it more next week. Until then, thank yous all around. To Christopher for producing and co-hosting, and to you for listening, of course. Please also check out our blog, sign up for our newsletter, all those things. We do them because we think you'll like them, and thereby like us. No, that isn't quite right. We just think you'll like them. You can find it all on embedded.fm along with a contact link if you'd like to say hello. Our final thoughts for our Just Us podcasts are supposed to be from Winnie the Pooh, but since I failed to bring down the book, this one is going to be from Ray Bradbury. Zen in the Art of Writing is one of his books about writing instead of books about science fiction. And he has this to say: I have never listened to anyone who criticized my taste in space travel, sideshows, or gorillas. When this occurs, I pack up my dinosaurs and leave the room. Embedded FM is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive any revenue from them. At this time, our sole sponsor remains Logical Elegance.